Hi guys, this is another video by Darklink Does Math. The content in this video is geared towards 6th grade math standards. These videos are public so that my students may access information easily, as well as anyone else looking for math help. I hope you find this video helpful. If you do not, I hope you can find what you're looking for elsewhere. There's a lot of information out there. Be aware that I'm not perfect, so there may be the occasional mistake. I apologize in advance if this should happen. So today, we're going over lesson 6.3% of a quantity. Specifically, we're going to be finding percentages of numbers. We have one definition, or one term, to provide the definition for. It is base. Base refers to the whole quantity of which a percent is found One important thing to note about a base, it does not represent a part. So, not a part, it's a whole, everything. So if I were to draw a bar to represent this, and I shaded 50%, meaning half of it. So this would be 50%. It's a part of our whole. So if I look at all of it, this whole bar represents what we call our base. And again, the base is everything. It's all. It's the whole thing. It represents 100% of something. All right, a couple quick examples. Let's say I was finding in the problem 20% of 85. 20% is the part that I'm going to take. 85 represents everything. So in this example, the base is 85. Another example, in 50% of 2, the base is 2. 50% represents the part. It's what you want. So in other words, in this problem, I'm essentially asking what's half of 2. 2 represents everything, so 2 is referred to as our base. All right, first practice problem. So we're going to have two types of problems that we're going to be going over. One is finding percents of numbers. The other is calculating a base, or the grand total or original total of something. So the first practice problem, we're going to be finding percents of quantities or percents of numbers. So I'm going to make a note of that. Percent of number. That's what this type of problem is going to be. All right, example 1. We're going to find 5% of 160. You can't get any more clear on what type of problem this is. It's a percent of a number because it literally says 5% of 160. So, a couple things to note, or one thing to note, 160 is going to be our base. So 160 represents the whole amount, everything, all of it, the original grand total. All right, we're going to do this two different ways. So, method 1. First step, there are two steps on finding a percent of a number, at least using this method there is. First step is you're going to want to change your percentage to a decimal. So change percent to decimal. Why? So you can calculate your answer easily. It'll help you with your calculations. Step 2. After you change your percent to a decimal, you're going to multiply your decimal by the base. So let's try that out with this problem. We're going to find 5% of 160. So 5% of 160. It means I want a small piece of that number. So I'm expecting my answer to be a small number because I want a small piece of it. That's what finding a percent of a number means. All right, so first step, it says change percent to a decimal. So on 5%, we're going to first locate our decimal. It would be behind the 5, and I'm going to do it slightly below my number. And the rule is to change a percent to a decimal, you're going to move your decimal 2 place values left. And it's going to end up with an empty spot. So this is going to become 5 hundredths, or 0.05. Next, the word of means multiplication, and that's what our step 2 is. Multiply your decimal by the base. So we're going to take 0.05 times our base, which is 160. So 0.05 times 160. And let's see, can't seem to find my calculator. I could do this by hand, of course. All right, so we're going to do 0.05 times 160. We're going to get 8. So what does this mean? 5% of 160 is 8, and that's going to be our answer. 5% of 160 is 8. So that little small piece of that large number is going to be that small number. Now, let's do this another way. So, method 2. Method 2 uses ratio reasoning. So, first step. We see that 160 is representative of our base, or the whole amount. The whole amount is 100%. It's everything. So we're going to start by writing 100%. What number represents everything? 160. So 100% equals 160. They're the same thing. Everything, everything. Now, what do I want? I want a piece of it. I want 5%. So I want to know, what number is 5%? Well, how do I go from 100 to 5? I could do that. However, it might be easier if you take smaller steps and find 1% first, and then go from 1% to 5%. Either way works most of the time, but if your numbers aren't nice, I would recommend going to 1% and then going to 5%, or whatever percent you need. So how do you go from 100% to 1%? Divide by 100. So what you do to one side, do to the other. So what is 160? Divide by 100. When you divide by 100, it just moves the decimal 2 times left. I could show you that with a calculator. 160 divided by 100. See? Decimal moved 2 times left. So using a calculator was really pointless. So anyways, 1.6. That's 1% of 160. Now we're going to find 5%. So how do you go from 1% to 5%? Multiply by 5. What you do to one side, do to the other. So what's 1.6 times 5? We get 8. And we already knew that was going to be our answer because we've already done this problem. So again, 5% of 160 is 8. So this way I usually like more because it's more efficient. It's right to the point. You change your percent to a decimal and you multiply. This one involves a little bit more. It's still fairly straightforward. It's pretty quick. Not as quick as that method. Do what is best for you. All right, next problem. We're going to find 35% of 80 cans of soda. So what type of problem is this? Well, it's specifically asking for a percent of a number. It wants that much of 80 cans of soda. This would be like if your friend comes over to you and says, I want 35% of all of your soda. And you're like, no. But anyways, you agree to it. Well, now you need to find out, well, how many cans of soda did you promise them when you said, yes, you can have 35% of all my soda? Couple things. Cans of soda is going to be your label. So we're going to find a piece or part of these cans of soda. Want to know how much that is. Second, 80 represents the whole amount. So that's our base. So this is another percent of number problem, because I want a percent of a number, also because it gives me a base. If it gives you a base, you are typically wanting a percent of it. All right, method 1. If you want a percent of a number, first write what you want. I want 35% of 80. First step, change your percent to a decimal. So we're going to move our decimal 2 times to the left. So the decimal's at the back because it's a whole number. Move it 2 times left. It's going to end up in front of the 3. So 35% is really 35 hundredths. Of means multiply, and that's our second step. Multiply your decimal, or percent in decimal form, by the base, which is 80. So 35% of 80 is 35 hundredths times 80. And what's that going to be? 35 hundredths times 80, 28. 28 what? Well, cans of soda. That's going to be our label. So this one has a label. So if your friend says, I want 35% of all of your soda, what are you going to give him? Well, you're going to give him 28 cans of soda. And you're not really happy about that. And you're like, why did I agree? All right, so 35% of 80 is 28 cans of soda. Always include your labels, otherwise you don't know what you're talking about. For all we know, you could be talking about 35% of 80 unicorns, but unicorns don't exist, so you can't really have 35% of them. All right, let's do that another way. Method 2. So first step, ask yourself, what equals what? I want a piece of this number. That implies that 80 cans of soda is everything, 100%. So we're going to start by writing 100% is, or equals, 80. These two things represent the same thing, everything. What do you want? We want 35%. Now in this one, it is not quite easy to go from 100 to 35 through multiplication or division. So we do need to find 1% first. So how do you go from 100 to 1? Divide by 100. So take 80 and divide by 100. So remember, dividing by 100 means you move your decimal 2 times left. So this is going to be 0.8. Not going to use a calculator. That's pointless. All right, now how do you go from 1 to 35%? Multiply by 35. So take 0.8 times 35. We get 28. Of course, we already knew that because we've already done this problem. So what is 35%? It's equal to 28. So 35% of 80 is 28. 28 what? Cans of soda. So again, finding percents of numbers means you want a part or piece of it. So finding 35% of 80 cans of soda means you want a portion of those sodas. In this case, it would be 28. All right, third example. Word problem. There are 500 kids. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a total to me, which might imply that it's a base. Keep that in mind. 35% are 8th graders, so that's a portion, a part. 35% are 7th graders, another part. The rest are 6th graders. We're probably going to need to find that. Then it says, how many 6th graders are there? Now, it's asking for a portion of something. Because it's asking for a portion, that implies that we know the whole, meaning 500 kids is our base. So let's jot that down. $500 is the base. That means 500 is everyone, all kids, all 100% of them. So this is a percent of number problem. When you're given the base and you want a portion of it, that's a percent of number problem. All right, so first step. Let's find out how many 6th graders there are percentage-wise. So it says 35% are 8th graders and 35% are 7th graders. So let's add those up. So 35% 8th, 35% are in 7th. If I add those, we get 70%, meaning more than half, but less than everyone, are 7th and 8th. Now, how do I find 6th grade? Well, if 70% are 7th and 8th grade, that means there are 30% in 6th grade. Now, how do we get that? 100% represents everyone. If you get rid of the 7th and 8th graders, because they're not as important as 6th grade, you get 30%. All right, now, this is not our answer. It says, how many 6th graders are there? I can't say 30% 6th graders. It's not a real number. It's like if I said, Johnny ate 50% of my pizza. That does not tell you how many slices of pizza he ate. So, I am halfway. I almost have found out how many 6th graders there are. So that's the percentage of a number that I need to find. So step 2, because 30% are in 6th grade and I want 6th graders, I'm going to use that percent to formulate my problem. So our problem is, we know 30% are in 6th grade. So we want 30% of, what's the base? What's everyone? Everyone is 500. So we want 30% of 500 kids. Another way to think about this and how to set up your problem. I want to know how many 6th graders there are. If you can find the percent of what you want, that's going to be your problem. I found the percent of what I want. 30% are in 6th grade. So we want 30% of however many kids there are in all, and that's our problem. So let's convert that. First step, change 30% to a decimal. So that's going to end up being 0.30 or 30 hundredths. Second step is multiply by the base, which is 500. So 30% of 500 means you're going to find 30 hundredths times 500. What is that going to equal? We get 150. 150 what? This was 30% of 500 kids, so this is 150 kids. So, how many 6th graders are there? 30% are in 6th grade, 30% is equal to 150. So our answer is, there are 150 6th graders. All right, next problem. We're going to switch. So we've just done percent of numbers problems where we found a part or portion of something. For example, like 80% of, or sorry, 28%. Nope, messed up again. 35% of 80 cans of soda. And then we found 30% of 500 kids. Now we're going to find the whole or base given a quantity and its percent. That means you're going to be given a number and a percentage, and they're going to be the same thing. So when that happens, that means you have yourself a base problem. So always look and be aware if it gives you a number and a percent and they're the same thing, it's going to be a find a base problem. So let's look at our problem. Julia has 8% of her DVDs in a box. So 8% are in the box. If there are 96 DVDs in the box, how many DVDs are in her collection? So, two things. It says 8% are in a box, 96 DVDs in the box. Notice how it repeats itself. It's telling you right away that these two things are the same thing. So in other words, 8% is equal to 96. When that happens, that means this is a base problem automatically. Now, the second thing says how many DVDs are in her collection. The word collection implies in all, like a whole bunch of stuff. So in other words, it wants a whole amount. So again, more proof that this is a find a base problem. All right, so there are two methods that we can use to find a base. Let me add one more thing over here. Because 8% equals 96, again, more proof that we are finding a base. Meaning the whole amount, everything. Okay, method one. So we're going to start with our percent that we're given. 8% are in the box. So 8% of her collection. Now, I'm not going to write of her collection. That's a lot. So we're going to start using variables, letters. So 8% of x. X just represents a number. So 8% of, again, this means a number. What's that number represent? Her collection, everything, the base, in other words. So 8% of something, all of her DVDs, is going to be equal to 96 DVDs. Why again? Because 8% are in the box, 96 are in the box. It's the same thing. All right, now what do you do with this? Well, you're always, let's write our little rule down here. On base problems, you're always going to divide by the percent in decimal form. If you remember, finding percents of numbers, we multiplied by the decimal, or sorry, the percent in decimal form. So bases are opposites. All right, let's look through this problem. 8%, we're going to change it to decimal form, which is 0.08, and we're going to divide. Again, that's a fraction bar. It means divide. What you do to one side, you do to the other. So take 96 and divide by 0.08. So again, we're dividing by the percentage in decimal form. You don't always have to do this, but I'm going to do this the first time to show you what's going to happen. When we take 8 and divide by itself in decimal format, we get 100. 100%. So just always know that this is going to be 100% over here. So 100% of her collection, we're just going to say X for short, 100% of everything is going to be, and this is going to give us our answer, 96. Always top divided by bottom. 96 divided by 0.08. 1,200. 1,200 what? DVDs. So we're saying all of her collection is 1,200 DVDs if 8% of her collection is 96. So if a small part is that means everything is going to be that number. That kind of makes sense. If almost 100 DVDs is a very small portion, she's going to have a lot, right? So our answer is, how many DVDs are in Julia's collection? We're going to say Julia has 1,200 DVDs in her collection. Okay, I said there was another way to do this. I mean, this is pretty efficient, but maybe you just don't like it. So, method 2. We're going to use ratio reasoning. So think, what equals what? 8% equals 96. So that's where we're going to start. 8% equals 96 DVDs. Now this is the opposite. We're wanting a base. What does that mean? That means we want to know 100%. It's not quite easy to go from 8 to 100, so let's go to 1% first. So how do I go from 8% to 1%? Divide by 8. Then do that to the other side. Take 96. Divide by 8. 96 divided by 8 is 12. Now, I don't want 1% of her DVDs. I want 100. So how do I go from 1 to 100? Multiply by 100. What you do to one side, do to the other. So what's 12 times 100? 1,200 DVDs. So again, Julia has 1,200 DVDs. Method 1, much faster, but both are fairly straightforward. There's a certain routine and structure about it. It's usually always going to be the same for every type of problem. So let's review real quick. If you have a percent and it's equal to a number, you are finding a base, meaning you're finding the whole amount. To do method 1, you simply divide your number by the percentage in decimal form. So on this one, we took 96 divided by 0.08 and got our answer. Number 5, 27% of the students are in grade 6. This is 540. So it's literally telling you 27%, this is 540. So let's jot that down. 27%. This is 540. It's telling you these two things are the same thing. So this automatically means that this is a find a base problem. When it gives you a percent and a number and they are the same thing, it's a find a base, meaning we need to find the whole amount of something. So let's continue with the question and see if that's really what we want to find. How many students are there in the school? Yep, that kind of sounds like it wants the total. So again, if you're wanting to find how many students are in the school, it wants you to find the total, meaning the whole, meaning find the base, because that's what we refer to as the whole. All right, so how do I set up this problem? Start with your percent. 27% of the students, so we're just going to say of X. X represents, again, everyone, the school. You can jot it down if it will help make more sense. So 27% of everyone is equal to 540 kids. Now, what do? I'm going to divide by the percent in decimal form. So if I change 7% to a decimal, I move my decimal 2 times left, and that becomes 0.27. this side automatically is going to be 100. So 100% of the school equals, let's find our answer. 540, top divided by bottom. 540 divided by 0.27, meaning 27% decimal form, I get 2,000. So 100% of the school is 2,000. That means how many students are in the school? There are 2,000 students in the school. All right, we could, again, do this another way. So what equals what? Again, 27% equals 540. What do I want? I want 100%, meaning I want everyone. I want to know how many kids there are in all, not just 6th grade. I mean, 6th grade's important, but got to include everyone. All right, how do I go from 27 to 1? Divide by 27. So take 540 and divide by 27. It's probably going to be like 20. Let's see. Because 54, all right. 540 divided by 27. Yup, 20, because 27 goes into 54 twice, and there's a 0. Now, how do you go from 1 to 100? Multiply by 100. So do that to 20. 20 times 100 is going to be 2,000. So again, our answer is there are 2,000 students in the school. All right, let's continue. We've got a couple more practice problems. Number 6. 45% of a number is 50. Find the number. You'll notice that problem looks like this setup right here. That means this is a base problem. So this is basically saying find the base, find everything. All right, so let's just use that setup that we were just using. So we're going to basically rewrite that. 45% of a number, and I just usually use x, is equal to 50. So 45% equals 50. It's telling you these two things are the same thing. So you're finding everything. This part is that part. All right, what do I do when I'm doing a base? Divide by the percent in decimal form. So 45% is 0.45 as a decimal. So that's going to be 100% of our number, meaning the whole number is going to be 50 divided by 0.45. Ooh, 111.11111. That repeats. Yeah, repeating decimals are bad. So note about repeating decimals. Repeating decimals usually aren't accepted. And they certainly won't be accepted in my classroom. So what do? Do you round them? Do you do something else? Well, it depends on the particular problem, what you're being instructed to do. What I would recommend would be to change it to a fraction instead, unless you're instructed that you need to do something very specific with that repeating decimal. But for this lesson, we're going to recommend that you do fractions. Why? Because repeating decimals aren't precise, and we don't want to round because that's definitely not precise. You've changed your answer. So again, they're not precise. They're not exact. So what do? We're going to use our calculator and switch it back and forth between decimal or fraction and decimal. How do you do that on this particular calculator? You would push the second button, So keep your number in there, push second. Then you're going to push the PRB button. You'll notice right above it in blue, F to D. That means fraction to decimal or decimal to fraction. And then push equals. It changed it to 111 and 1/9. Very precise, very exact. Why do we want precise numbers? Well, you could then use that number and put it in use it in more or other calculations. You can't use repeating decimals in other calculations because it slowly starts to change your answer. So anyways, 50 divided by 0.45 was 111.1111. We changed it to a fraction using these buttons. So our precise answer is 111 and 1/9. Now, how would you do this by hand? Because, what if you don't have this calculator and you don't have those nice buttons that just switch back and forth? By the way, if I push second PRB button again, it switches it back and then back and forth, back and forth. So what does it look like by hand? Well, we're going to do 50 divided by 0.45. You can't divide by decimals, so move your decimal all the way to the right on the outside. It took 2 times, so move your decimal on the inside 2 times. What you do to one thing, do to the other. Bring it up, add any zeros if necessary. 45 goes into 50 once, which is 45. Subtract and get 5. Bring down 0. 45 goes into 50 one time, which is 45. Subtract, get 5. Bring down 0. 45 goes into 50 one time, which is 45. Subtract, get 5. Now, if I kept on going, I'm going to keep getting 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So we would stop because we're going to realize it's just going to keep repeating, meaning fraction would be preferred. We're going to write 111. We had 5 left over out of 45. This is not simplified. We can divide numerator and denominator both by the common factor of 5. And we get 111 and 1/9. So it took a little bit more work, obviously. But, not everyone has certain resources that will do it for them. All right. Anyways, 45% was equal to 50. So this is a base. We want to find everything. So we took 50 divided by the percent in decimal form and got 111 and 1/9. What does that mean? That means our number is 111 and 1/9. That represents everything, and 50 represented 45% of that number, a little less than half. All right, let's do it again. You'll notice this is the exact same setup I've been using. So 25% of a number, meaning x, is 30. And instead of writing is, let's just write equals to keep it consistent. All right, we're going to find x. So how do I find a base? Divide by the percent in decimal form. 25% is 0.25 as a decimal. So that's going to be 100% of x is equal to, let's see what 30 divided by 0.25 is, 120. It comes out nicely. So what's our answer? It says find x. We're going to say x is 120. That means 120 is the whole number, and a piece of that number is going to be 30. Wouldn't you agree that 30 would be a small piece of 120? Absolutely. At least it should. Okay, to wrap this up, we've gone over 2 types of problems. Percents of numbers or find a base. So, what do you do when you have, or the question asks you to find a percent of a number? Well, you'll notice if we look back at finding percents of numbers, we ultimately multiplied, assuming you did method 1. When you do method 2, you're going to be multiplying and dividing. No consistency. So we're referring to method 1. if you're finding a percent of a number, ultimately you're going to multiply. There's more to it. Obviously, you have to change your percent to decimals and so forth. What if you're finding a base? Well, if we look back at our find a base problems, assuming you're using method 1, you're dividing. So here are our last examples of bases. Again, dividing. So division. So if you're finding a percent of a number, you're going to multiply. If you're finding a base, you're going to divide. Those are your overall rules. There is more to it. Okay, now, how do you know what type of problem you're doing? Because let's be honest, not everybody is the best at doing word problems because it can just be a little confusing sometimes. So what are some hints? What are some strategies? If you're finding a percent of a number, your question is going to give you certain pieces of information. You will have, or you can find, the percent of what you want. If you have, or you can find the percent of the thing you want, you're finding a percent of a number. You can look at example 3 for this. Oops. Not example 3. So let's look at example 3 real quick. So this word problem right here, it didn't say find a base. It didn't say find a percent of a number. We had to figure it out. So the question said, how many 6th graders are there? Well, I would ask, can I find the percent of 6th graders? Well, if 35% are 8, 35% are 7th, I would add them up, subtract them from 100. I was able to find the percent of the thing I wanted. Because I found the percent of the thing I wanted, it's a percent of a number problem. You can also look at numbers, well, all of numbers 1 through 3 in these notes. So that tells you need to find a percent of a number. What else could you use, or what other strategy? Well, it will give you a base, meaning it'll give you the whole amount of something, or it will give you some grand total. That's not the best strategy to use because sometimes numbers, well, all numbers just sometimes look like totals. So be careful with that one. This is the best way. If you have or find a percent of the thing you want, you're going to find a percent of a number. All right. What if you're finding a base? How do you know if you're finding a base? What are some strategies? Well, the big one is you will have a percent that equals a given number. You can find this in example 4 and 5. So let's look at 4 and 5 real quick. Number 4. 8% in a box. 96 in a box. It just told us the same thing in a different form. So 8% equals 96. Because it gave us a percent and the number that it's equal to, that's a find a base problem. Number 5, 27% in grade 6. This is 540. So it's literally saying 27% is 540, meaning this is another find a base problem. You can also refer to all examples 4 through 7 on how to do a find a base problem. All right, any other strategies you can use to figure out if you're doing a base problem or finding a percent of a number problem? Well, if you're doing a base problem, it's going to want a total. So if it wants a total, meaning it wants everything, or it wants all of something, or it wants the complete amount. And it's going to run into that. Then you're wanting to find a base. So, quick example. This one said, how many students are in the school? It wants everyone. So, it's a find a base problem. Meaning, you're going to set your problem up, most likely, like this. All right, that covers both finding percents of numbers and finding bases. I hope this has helped. If it has not, there are many more examples out there to find on the internet. I hope you find what you're looking for. Y'all have a great day.